The healthcare arguments and the Kasich-Obama approval ratings continue to climb.
From the Battelle studio at WOSU at COSI, this is Columbus on the Record. Joining Mike Thompson this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Bill Cohen, State House correspondent for Ohio Public Radio, Bob Clegg, Republican strategist, and Janetta King, president of Innovation Ohio.
Ohio's state government is a player, a relative bit player, in the healthcare case that went before the Supreme Court this week. Ohio is one of 26 states claiming the law's expansion of Medicaid is too expensive. Of course, the Medicaid expansion could be moot if the High Court strikes down the key revenue source of the overhaul, the mandate that all of us have or buy health insurance. The arguments inside the court prompted protest in Washington and also here in Ohio. Opponents claim government intrusion. Supporters claim it's a way to fix the nation's healthcare system. Bill Cohen, why was Mike DeWine in D.C.? What was he trying to do?
Well, I think he was trying to symbolize his role leading Ohio into this whole thing. Remember, he ran for Attorney General on the promise that he would file this lawsuit, join the 25 other states. He was elected on that promise, and he went ahead, I think, on his day one in office to do it. I think he thinks it's a good public policy. Plus, I think he thinks it's good politics, because not only was he elected on that promise, but last November, Ohioans voted almost 2-1 this health care freedom amendment, which hinted that Ohio should have in the state constitution a ban or an exemption, we'll say, on Ohioans being forced to buy this coverage.
Bob Clegg, Mike DeWine says the individual mandate tramples our liberty by giving the government unprecedented authority. Is that a bit much? Does it really trample our liberty?
Well, it's telling us we have to buy a product, which I don't ever remember the government saying we have to do something or we're going to be penalized or taxed depending on what they want to call it that given day. But I mean, this is the problem we have here. We have the federal government saying we must purchase a certain kind of product, and if we don't, it's going to cost us some kind of a penalty or tax. And that's the big problem here, and that this is what the court's going to have to resolve.
Really what it is the government saying that you have to pay for what you use. Inevitably, we're all going to use the health care system, and by someone not buying it, that means that those of us with health insurance have to pick up that cost. So all of this talk about freedom and liberty, really it's the freedom for people to freeload, quite frankly. Well,
I mean, we got the one of the justices brought up the case of burial tax. We're all going to die. We all going to have to be buried, or something's going to have to be done with our body. And we're going to have to, is that going to be the next thing we're going to be told? Or are we going to be told that, okay, you have to pay for health insurance, but it's becoming too expensive for people because there are unhealthy people all over, and you're going to have to lead a better lifestyle. You're going to have to eat better. You're going to have to exercise more. Where's it going to stop?
Eat broccoli, as Justice Scalia.
But the broccoli example is not one that can apply here, because if you don't eat broccoli, that doesn't affect me. But if you don't buy health care, that does affect me.
But they could argue that if you don't eat broccoli, you're not eating healthy. That increases your health care costs. That causes everyone's health insurance to go up.
Well, you're seeing some provisions in private insurance plans now that penalize people for unhealthy lifestyles like smoking and such. So, some of these things are kind of creeping in the private market right now.
Now, Bob, Republicans, yes. I mean, a lot of the liberal groups have sent out all these videos, including Mitt Romney being the poster child of this. A lot of Republicans supported the individual mandate back in the early 90s when the first health care reform plan was presented by President Clinton.
Yes.
What's changed?
I don't know, but we need to ask the president, because when he ran for president in 2008, he was against the individual mandate. In fact, he made that one of his major points against Hillary Clinton, that he didn't like it, he thought it was unfair, and he was against it. But
you could argue he compromised, but the Republicans have gone farther back.
It depends on which way you're looking at it. Who compromised what there?
So he did compromise, because it is a private market solution, a private sector solution, where we are, in fact, using insurance companies to provide this coverage versus the federal government. And that absolutely is a conservative idea. And it's interesting seeing those conservative justices argue against a very inherently conservative idea.
Well, not such a conservative idea on that is the expansion of the Medicaid program, which a lot of these low-income adults who are uninsured now would go into the Medicaid program because they couldn't afford insurance on the private market. So it does cut both ways. There's conservative side to it, but there's also a big expansion of one of government's already biggest entitlement programs, which is Medicaid.
The thing is, Americans and Ohioans, they want the best of both worlds. You ask them, do you like the insurance coverage mandate? Oh, no, we don't like it. Well, do you like the other provisions that helps to make possible? Do you like the idea that, 25-year-old kids can be on their parents' insurance? Do you like the ban on insurance companies turning down people for pre-existing medical conditions? Oh, we like that. Well, I hate to tell you, maybe you can't have both. Maybe you have to pick and choose.
Some of those things are already in effect now, and the question is, if it gets struck down, what are you going to do with those kids who are 25 years old on their parents' insurance?
That is the question. If they get rid of if they declare the individual mandate to be unconstitutional, what happens to all these other provisions? Can they hold up without that in place? I think it's it's questionable.
The court could decide that very fact and say, look, the whole law falls apart.
Yeah, and that's what they discussed in that final day. They have to decide if they're going to, take down the individual mandate. Are they going to take it just that down or the whole bill?
We'll get to some more poll numbers in a moment, but the Quinnipiac found that healthcare ranks third in what Ohioans think is important this election. The economy was 91%. Unemployment was second, and healthcare was third at 77%. So it's important here, but it's not the number one issue. Does how this court decides this case sway Ohio voters come November?
I've always said I thought this decision that the U.S. Supreme Court's going to make on healthcare is going to be a very major factor across the country on the presidential election.
Even if the economy improves?
I still think it's going to be a very important factor because there's been so much attention, and after what just happened this week, when they come out with the actual decision in June, we're getting that much closer to the election. So, I think it's going to have a big impact.
Ironically, I think if the court knocks it down, especially if it knocks down the whole thing, that really energizes the Democrats and the liberals to come out to vote. And voter anger, that's usually a big motivating factor.
And if they don't overturn it, then it's the opposite. It's going to be the Republican side's going to be angry because they're going to know that the only way you can overturn this is by voting for a Republican president and a Republican Congress.
I think if Romney's the nominee, though, that's not so easy because he has supported the individual mandate.
But his argument, though, is more solidified because if the court takes away the individual mandate, what it's saying is the federal government can't do it. Romney can say, see, this is what I've always said. You can do this in a state, but you cannot do this and force all Americans on a federal basis.
And he has promised to repeal it, so where President Obama certainly has not promised to repeal it if he's reelected. So chances of getting it repealed if Romney gets elected are much greater than Obama.
But his switching in his position is just going to bring up this theme that's very damaging to Romney, is that he can't stick with one position.
Well, the president could have stuck with being against the individual mandate and we wouldn't be here, would we?
All right. Let's get to our second topic. It appears the Obama-Kasich recovery is helping the Obama-Kasich approval ratings. Quinnipiac University poll shows that President Obama holds a 6-point lead over Mitt Romney, 47% to 41%. It's still relatively close, but this is the president's largest lead in this poll over Romney to date. John Kasich's approval rating continues to creep up. It stands at 42%. He's now breaking even with his disapproval rating. Still a little low, but 2 points higher than last month and 12 points higher than it was at this time last year. Bob Clegg, Kasich and Obama. Ohioans seem to like that team.
For now. That could change. You never know. For the governor, obviously it's great. His poll numbers are going up. But, he's got over 2 more years. So, it really doesn't tell you all that much, other than he is doing much better than he has been. And I think it's the jobs that have been created here in Ohio, just the general feeling. Our unemployment rate now in the state is lower than it is nationally. So, I think people are noticing that, and they're giving him credit for it.
After the election, if you were to tell John Kasich, with all the problems that Ohio faced after he was elected, the deficit and everything else, that after year one, you'd be at 42%. Would he have taken that?
Yeah, I think he would have, because I think he came into this with a very strong idea that he was going to have to do some very unpopular things, and he was going to take a hit on it. And I think he was ready for this. So I think, I don't think they're all that unhappy. I think they should be happier than the president and his people, because the problem with the president's numbers is that tells you how bad he's been, that if we're looking at a 47-41 lead over Romney, that's good. when you're the incumbent and you're the president of the United States and 99.9% of the people know you, and you can't get above 50% in a swing state, you got a problem.
I think this is all about the economy, these numbers, and it's not one thing that John Kasich did that's bumping up his numbers. I mean, both he and the president are riding the wave of the economy. And I think if it keeps going in this direction, it's certainly good news because the president is, going to be up first. And so in November, if the economy is going this way, it's pretty much done.
It reflects how people feel. People feel good about the economy. People feel good about their lives. Then they're happy with the person that's in office. But there's still, we still have 6 or 7 months to go. So much can change. One thing that I think you can just bank on is that it's just going to be tight. Ohio's going to decide the election probably again this time.
A couple other, not to get numbers heavy here, but does the president deserve to be elected? It's dead even. 48% yes, 48% no. 68%, more than 2/3 of Ohioans say they are dissatisfied with the way things are going. How does that match up with rising approval numbers for the president and the governor? It doesn't. If you're dissatisfied with how you're going, why are you still happy with your guys?
There's a general level of discontent with people and what's going on in government at all levels, whether it's local, state, or federal. And that's something that all these guys are going to have to deal with this year when they're running for election, because I don't think people are really happy. And I don't care, how much the economy improves. We're still at 8.3% unemployment. And, back in the day, that would have been an unemployment level that you never could have gotten reelected, whether you're a president or a congressman or a U.S. senator.
It's all relative.
Women are holding one key to this whole thing. There's this noticeable gender gap, which I think we've had, seems like almost every year for the last 20 years. Women really going much more heavy for the Democrat, whoever it might be, and men pretty much split.
Especially this cycle because of what we've seen, the infighting among the Republicans talking about issues as basic as access to contraception. I think women are watching that. I don't think that is going to be erased by an Etch-a-Sketch, and I think it's going to be a real factor this November.
Janetta, are Democrats using the health care fight to attract women voters?
Well, a lot of what is in the health care law does, in fact, help women. We've already talked about this prohibition from discriminating against women, sometimes up to 50% more for premiums. The health care law says insurance companies can no longer do that. So to the extent that it is tied, I think it's fair because this was a bill that will help women.
Bob, does that worry Republicans that they alienate some women voters, even moderately conservative women voters, by coming out against some portions of the health care bill?
No, because there are both men and women, vast majorities of which the polling has shown that are against that individual mandate. Mm-hmm. So, as far as the politics of this, I think you're better off being against the individual mandate and the law in general than you would be to be for it.
Real quick, on the Senate race, Quinnipiac found that Sherrod Brown still holds a sizable lead over Josh Mandel, but Mandel has closed that gap by 3 points over the past month. Sherrod Brown leads 46 to 36%. Josh Mandel has been in the he tickled the upper 30s at one point, but he's been basically the 30s throughout. Is it getting late yet for Josh Mandel?
No, it's not getting late at all. Remember, Sherrod Brown's been running for 40 years. Once again, you have an individual that everybody knows. He's been on the statewide ballot at least 5 times.
But Josh Mandel
he can
hasn't
only
been alive
get
for
46. Yeah, I know.
Does that hurt him, though?
His
young age?
No. The problem that Sherrod has is he's been around for so long, and he doesn't pay his taxes, which people have found out lately, and those are issues
He paid
him eventually after his property went on the sheriff's auction block. He finally paid it. But
he claims it was accounting error, but
yeah. But that's what happens. You run for office for that long, you get out of touch, you don't pay your taxes, and people know that. They understand that.
Again, that gender gap, really noticeable in this race. The Quinnipiac poll showed women favor Sherrod Brown over Mandel by 17 points. So.
And I think that Josh Mandel is going to have to do something to break out. This is consistently a double-digit lead for Sherrod in a lot of these polls. And what he is doing now is not working. He's being criticized for not showing up at work, for not taking positions on things. And when he does take a position, he's being called out by the media for not telling the truth. And that's not going to do it.
But yet, during that time, his poll numbers improved a little bit. He's still low, but they improved 3 points.
Yeah, I think some of that is just going to be, basic name recognition and him getting
you look
out
at
there
the
a little
race
bit.
and you look at where the numbers can grow. They grow on the Mandel side because you have less than half the people know Josh Mandel. where 98, 95% of the people know Sherrod Brown.
Okay, let's get to our third topic. As drilling companies continue to buy drilling rights in Ohio, lawmakers are trying to figure out how to regulate them and how much to tax them. A bill in the Senate would require companies to report most of the chemical compounds drillers inject into the ground. But as the dispatch reports, companies would not have to disclose specific chemicals that are trade secrets. Environmentalists who fear pollution want full disclosure. The companies don't want to share secret formulas with their competitors. Janetta King, it would have the companies divulge chemical compounds. Is that enough of a compromise to satisfy those folks and let this go forward?
It's not enough, and this is why. The process of fracking is injecting poisonous chemicals into our land. And that's what it is. So the least we can do is have very good disclosure laws. And here are a couple of reasons why what we're talking about now doesn't go far enough. As you said, one, there's a big loophole under proprietary information. But also, we're not requiring, like some states, that this information has to be released on a well-by-well basis. So there's aggregate information at the state level, but if I am in a community where this activity is happening, that does nothing for me. I don't know what's going on locally. Some states require that, and I don't know why Ohioans wouldn't demand that. And then also, in what's being debated, the companies would have to release this information 60 days after they use the chemicals. Again, in other states, they require that disclosure up front before it's used and not after the fact. So I think that it doesn't go far enough, and we have a lot more we need to do on behalf of Ohioans.
So, Bob, where's the balance here between protect? I mean, the companies have a legitimate right. This is a complicated procedure, an expensive procedure. If they figure out a way to do it better than the other guy, they should have a right to protect that. But how do we also protect groundwater and other things?
Well, I think the state, and I think the governor's been very open about trying to make sure that whatever process they're going to use, it's a safe process. So I think these companies are just going to have to work with the state of Ohio to ensure that whatever they're doing is safe.
But will the state be tough enough to make sure they're safe?
Well, I mean, the state has already jumped in pretty strongly with all that stuff that was occurring in Youngstown with the earthquakes and all that. I think the state knows that they have to be the entity that's going to safeguard this stuff.
The tax issue is still out there. The governor said this week that he's kind of laying low. He's not going to pound the lawmakers into submission to get them to agree to his increased severance tax, or imposing of the severance tax increase and other things. Bill Cohen, is this we're just in a waiting game here? Can he win over lawmakers who are skeptical of this increased tax on fracking companies?
I think he can, but not in the short run. They want to deal with other things now and go home and campaign for re-election this year.
Kathy, did he set the bar too low?
Right.
He asked for a 5% severance tax eventually, 4% severance tax. I forget what it was. If he'd asked for 10 and they settled on 5, he'd been golden. He's got so little
like a
wiggle room
gambler.
here. Yeah.
I think he just laid it out the way he envisioned it. I don't think I think he was sincere in what he was asking for. But I think Bill's exactly right. There is no appetite to deal with this in the legislature right now, and so he's doing the right thing by just backing off and waiting until they're ready to deal with it. He won't get anything right now.
And I think in the long term, this severance tax is going to happen because I think that people generally want the oil companies to pay their fair share. They're coming in, extracting this wealth. Ohioans deserve a benefit.
But he just has to hold up those 2 dimes over and over again. And the 20 cents they're paying on per barrel of oil now. That's a
And the
great
interest
visual.
groups are all lining up for a piece of this money. You know, we've had the education groups say that the money should go towards schools. Human services groups say the money should go to help, poor Ohioans.
He's going to put it towards income tax cut, which is what he said.
Well, this is going to be the
and
real
he wants to do
fight,
an
how
income
these
tax.
how these are expended.
How the money's spending, right.
In addition to the tax hikes and cuts in the governor's plan, there is a sweeping reform package, education reform package. A major part of the package affects only Cleveland, but it could be a model for other struggling districts around the state. The Cleveland school fix includes preschool for all 4-year-olds. The district would share future tax levies with charter schools. Top teachers would receive merit pay. It would allow the district to fire, quote, ineffective teachers, and it would eliminate seniority as the sole factor in determining layoffs or transfers. Teachers' unions argue it's a little too close to Senate Bill 5. Kathy Kandinsky, the governor likes this plan. He mentioned it in his mid-biennium address. Will it go statewide? Could it go statewide?
It could. I mean, the governor is certainly framing it as something that could be a model for all urban districts. But clearly that was not the intent of Mayor Frank Jackson in Cleveland, nor the Cleveland Schools CEO. They say that what they've come up with is a plan to address the problems in the Cleveland school. And in fact, Eric Gordon, the CEO, said it would be a real danger to just pick up this plan and apply it in other districts. You know, he said it's that you just kind of need to meet the individual needs of the district. And that's what they argue they are trying to do, is that the provisions of their plan are designed specifically to meet the needs of the Cleveland School District, which, you know, has been suffering and troubled for some time. I think 55% of the schools in that district are in academic watch or academic emergency. So there's a real urgency being presented from their side on the need to do something. And I think they argue some of the provisions that are being questioned about, you know, staffing moves and such, they say are needed so that they can act quickly and respond quickly to these
Speaking
problems.
of acting quickly, are they acting too quickly after Senate Bill 5? Because a lot of these things were in Senate Bill 5, and that went down big. Is it too close, both in content and in time, to the collective bargaining?
I think it's an unfortunate reality from their perspective that many of the provisions in this proposal are identical or very similar to some of the provisions in Senate Bill 5. So if you're an opponent to the plan, like the teachers' unions and others that are opposing it, they're comparing it, and rightfully so, comparing many of the provisions to Senate Bill 5. I think it's a real problem for the supporters.
But the actual provisions that are included in this plan are things that have been discussed for the last, 10, 15, 20 years. This isn't something that just came out of Senate Bill 5. This is things that a lot of urban schools have been wanting to do. Now, granted, we've got Senate Bill 5 on the ballot, and the people had their voice, but we're talking about an urban school district that's in an emergency, that something has to be done. And I can appreciate the CEO for Cleveland saying, well, don't take this and use this in all these other urban districts, but all our urban school districts here in Ohio are in terrible shape, and they all need help. And, I mean, things like this is what's going to get those schools back on track.
If we don't see this plan go statewide immediately, I think it eventually will have impacts on the education community throughout the state. I think it will be seen as a demonstration project. We have a history of, for example, vouchers in Cleveland,
and so
Cleveland, yep. Yeah. So this is something that charter school. This is something that I think everybody should pay attention to, because ultimately these could be things we do see statewide.
Right.
Okay, real quick, remember that election law that, among other things, cut the number of early voting days? Soon after it became law, opponents launched a repeal effort. They collected signatures to get it on the ballot in November, putting the law on hold. Now the legislature is trying to repeal the law, which would cancel the November vote. All right, Bill Cohen, very confusing. Aren't Democrats happy the legislature is trying to repeal it?
Well, yes and no. They'd love to have this referendum still be on the ballot in November, because they think it would bring out a lot of Obama supporters, a lot of liberals and Democrats. So they'd like to have it there as a punching bag. And I think the Republicans, on the other hand, have realized, I think we overreached, maybe like we did last year, and they don't want it to be there. They're trying to neutralize the situation.
So they're not going to replace it with anything else. They're just going to take it off the table?
I think that is still up for grabs, because right now it's not just a repeal. It is a repeal with some replacement. And I think that those folks who are supportive of repealing 194 in November, they can't even get to the conversation of do we not still have that effort, because it is in fact being replaced with some of the same provisions in House Bill 194.
House Bill 194 is the election reform law that was passed.
Yeah, and I don't agree with any Democrats who think that somehow this is going to bring people out to vote in a presidential election year. The presidential race is the thing that brings people out. Any kind of a obscure election law that's being on the ballot for a referendum is not going to be bringing anybody out that wouldn't have voted for president.
So the reason the Republicans are so eager to repeal a law that they just passed is?
Because they want to get it off so there's no confusion. Because that's what's happening. There's been confusion
it's very
on what's
unpopular.
going on. You got to end the confusion. We don't want people confused.
I think they got to end the stomping that they've been taking on these referendums.
Absolutely.
Is what I think they're trying to end.
All right, let's get to our weekly off-the-record parting shots. Janetta King, you're up first.
I think in this election cycle, it's absolutely going to be about women at the national level, at the state level, at the local level. A lot of women's issues. There's been a real awakening about this, and I think it's going to be a liability for the conservatives.
Bob.
We've got 3 more primaries coming up next week, Wisconsin, D.C., Maryland. I think Romney's going to win all 3, and I think the march towards the nomination will just be that much more.
Okay, Bill.
By July of 2013, I think we will have higher taxes on the oil and gas industry, not this year, but next year, probably with a new budget. If somebody is conservative and anti-tax and pro-business, as John Kasich thinks your industry is not paying enough taxes, probably most people agree.
All right. And Kathy?
I think that as the Cleveland school plan moves, they're going to try real hard to get some Democrats on board with the plan, and I think it's going to get to the point where they lose the Republican support that they've got for it, and they're going to be trying to go in that direction as well.
Okay. In the past year, I have predicted that the Cleveland Indians and Columbus Blue Jackets would make the playoffs. I have predicted that the Patriots would win the Super Bowl and that Peyton Manning would play for the Bengals. And last week, I predicted that Syracuse would beat Ohio State in the NCAA tournament. So, Buckeye fans, I have one thing to say. You're welcome. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Please check us out online. We're on Facebook. We're on Twitter. You can connect to that at our website, wosu.org/COTR. And if you miss an episode, you can catch streaming video at our website as well. For our crew here at WOSU at COSI and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.
Thank God you don't go back and like